Hi, Enon. Thanks for ringing.
Hi, can I just say how refreshing the show is today? And in the past couple of days, we're not discussing the Sussexes. No
Exactly.
one's discussing the Sussexes.
Thank you.
And Vanessa, you're not on your bench, let's say, criticizing the Sussexes. So it's a lovely show to hear.
Excuse me, criticizing the Sussexes? That's not me.
We're moving on.
What's that guy called? Hang on, Enon. Listen, you know that guy who the Sussexes usually give all the stories to, and he always writes about them. What's his name?
With the dark hair.
Yes, with the dark hair. That guy.
Scobie.
Exactly. Omid Scobie. That Omid Scobie.
Omid Scobie.
Yeah, Enon. He once actually sent me a message to say that my coverage of the Sussexes was incredibly balanced, and Meghan had been delighted, Enon. So that's not fair.
That's a surprise.
Yeah,
but
it's
anyway,
true, though, I promise.
Yes, I do think I'm on the side of banning skirts because, as you.
Something very awkward happened on UK radio, and it only took 60 seconds to expose years of denial that many listeners had quietly noticed but rarely heard acknowledged aloud. No shouting, no argument, no dramatic confrontation, just one caller and a media mask slipping live on air, while the hosts tried to keep the program moving. Twitter noticed immediately and began circulating the clip because it captured something unscripted and revealing. This was meant to be a normal phone-in show with no drama, no royal segment, no Harry, no Meghan, and that absence alone became the story. The caller rang in not to attack anyone, but to thank the host for how refreshing the program had been over the past couple of days. Refreshing not because of bold journalism, but because the Sussexes had not been dragged into the discussion yet again. That small comment carried weight because it reflected audience fatigue that broadcasters often pretend does not exist. When silence feels refreshing, it tells you how constant the noise usually is. The caller then went a step further and casually observed that Vanessa Feltz was not on her usual bench criticizing the Sussexes today. It was not said with anger or sarcasm, but as a matter of fact, almost conversational, and that calmness made it harder to dismiss. The reaction was instant. Vanessa pushed back sharply, saying, "Excuse me, criticizing the Sussexes? That is not me." In that moment, the atmosphere shifted because this was not clarification or nuance, but flat denial. Anyone who has followed British media coverage over the past several years knows that criticism of Prince Harry and Meghan Sussex has not been rare or occasional. It has been persistent, often harsh, and frequently personal, repeated across panels, columns, and phone-ins. So when a listener gently points out a visible pattern, the response is not reflection, but rejection. The show tried to move on quickly, but the discomfort lingered because the comment had landed. Then things became more awkward. Out of nowhere, Vanessa introduced the name Omid Scobie. She did not do so carefully or respectfully, fumbling his name and reducing him to a throwaway joke, a familiar tactic used against journalists perceived as sympathetic to the Sussexes. But then she made a claim that stopped the conversation cold. She said Omid Scobie had once messaged her privately to praise her coverage of the Sussexes as incredibly balanced, and that Meghan Sussex herself had been delighted by it. That single word, delighted, hung in the air because it rewrote years of public commentary in one sentence. There was no context offered, no time frame, no example of which coverage supposedly earned that response. It was presented as fact in the very moment she was being challenged, and that timing mattered. This was not an anecdote shared casually, but a defense deployed strategically. In less than a minute, a routine phone-in had turned into a live case study of how British media figures respond when their narratives are questioned by the audience they speak to every day. The denial, the name-dropping, and the sudden appeal to private validation all revealed insecurity rather than confidence. Instead of acknowledging that coverage can be excessive or unbalanced, the instinct was to insist that criticism never existed at all. That is why this moment resonated far beyond the radio show itself. It captured denial in real time and showed how fragile the claim of balance becomes when confronted with even mild public observation. The power of this exchange lies in its ordinariness, because nothing about the caller was extreme. They did not accuse anyone of malice or demand an apology. They simply reflected what many listeners have internalized after years of repetitive coverage. The speed of the defensive response showed how sensitive the topic remains behind the scenes. It also exposed a gap between how media figures see themselves and how audiences experience their output. To the presenter, the coverage may feel fair or justified, but to the listener, it feels relentless. That disconnect is where trust erodes. When media personalities deny obvious patterns, they appear out of touch rather than authoritative. This moment also demonstrated how quickly personal credibility is invoked when institutional credibility feels threatened. By claiming private praise from Omid Scobie and Megan Sussex, the focus shifted away from public record and into unverifiable territory. That move asked the audience to suspend memory and accept reassurance instead of evidence. For many listeners, that request simply did not land. It set the stage for what happened next online and why this brief clip refused to disappear after the broadcast ended. Those remaining seconds mattered because they exposed habits audiences have been trained to recognize, habits that quietly shape narratives while denying responsibility. For years in Britain, Twitter went silent for a brief moment and then erupted because viewers immediately understood what had just happened. The claim invited scrutiny, and social media delivered it at speed. People asked a simple question. When exactly was Megan Sussex delighted by coverage that has repeatedly framed her as manipulative, divisive, or insincere? The public record did not match the reassurance offered on air, and users began pulling receipts within minutes. Old video clips resurfaced showing dismissive panel discussions. Past columns were shared highlighting loaded language and assumptions. Archived interviews were reposted to demonstrate patterns that could not be erased by a single sentence. The internet did what it does best by providing memory where traditional media often relies on amnesia. One of the most striking aspects of the reaction was the sudden repositioning of Omid Scobie. For years, he has been portrayed by the same media ecosystem as biased, overly emotional, or untrustworthy. Yet in this moment, his alleged approval became valuable currency. That contradiction did not go unnoticed. You cannot dismiss a journalist as irrelevant while simultaneously using his private praise as proof of balance. Either his voice matters or it does not. The same contradiction applied to Megan Sussex herself. If her perspective is routinely minimized or mocked, it cannot suddenly become decisive validation when convenient. This tension sat at the center of the online response. Commentators were not outraged so much as incredulous. Many pointed out that this exchange was not really about the Sussexes at all. It was about accountability and how institutions react when gently challenged. The caller did not demand change, yet the reaction revealed deep sensitivity. That sensitivity suggests awareness rather than ignorance. It suggests that on some level, media figures know the coverage has been excessive, even if they cannot publicly admit it. This is where the clip becomes instructive. It shows how denial functions as a defense mechanism rather than a factual position. Instead of acknowledging audience fatigue, the instinct is to reframe criticism as misunderstanding. Instead of recognizing imbalance, the instinct is to assert neutrality. Over time, that pattern erodes trust because audiences feel gaslit by insistence that what they see and hear is not happening. The irony is that the caller was not defending Prince Harry or Meghan Sussex. They were not praising their choices or endorsing their projects. They simply expressed relief at a brief pause in coverage. That modest comment exposed how central the Sussexes have become to certain media formats. Their absence felt notable because their presence is normally constant. This reliance creates a feedback loop where commentary feeds outrage and outrage feeds ratings while fatigue builds quietly in the background. The clip disrupted that loop for a moment. It also illustrated how quickly conversations are redirected when they threaten comfort. The host attempted to move on, the tone shifted, the topic dissolved, but the damage was already done because the audience had heard the denial and the justification. In the broader context, this moment arrives as public attitudes continue to shift. More people are questioning why Harry and Meghan were targeted with such intensity and why so many claims collapsed under scrutiny. Media trust remains fragile, and moments like this do little to repair it. They instead reinforce perceptions of defensiveness and unwillingness to self-examine. What lingers from this exchange is not anger, but clarity. In 60 seconds, a listener articulated what many feel, and the response confirmed it. When the Sussexes were not discussed, the silence felt refreshing. That single observation revealed more than hours of panel debate ever could. It revealed that the issue is not oversensitivity among viewers, but oversaturation within programming. Repetition dulls credibility and breeds cynicism, even among casual audiences. When the same subjects are revisited endlessly without new insight, they become placeholders for broader frustrations. The Sussexes have filled that role for years. This exchange peeled back the curtain just enough to show how automatic the responses have become. Denial arrives before consideration, authority replaces listening. That reflex is what audiences increasingly reject. This is why the clip continues circulating long after the broadcast ended. It captures a rare, unscripted moment where audience perception and media self-image collide. There is no dramatic scandal, only quiet exposure. Listeners recognized themselves in the caller and saw their own thoughts mirrored back through an awkward exchange. That recognition builds solidarity and fuels sharing. It also explains why attempts to dismiss the reaction have failed. People are not reacting to outrage, but to honesty. They are responding to the relief of having a pattern named aloud. That is why this moment matters, and why it will be remembered. It reflects a turning point in how audiences engage with familiar narratives across British media.